I finally figured out when I was sort of meditating and thinking about, well, how do I move from surviving to thriving? Because I have this idea that I've got to do more, and thriving means I've got to make more money, and I've just got to work out more and all this sort of stuff. And what I'm doing really, though, is I'm building up resistance against reality. And when I'm building up that resistance against reality, I get exhausted. I get tired. It's hard constantly fighting reality. Do you ever feel like you're just surviving and you'd like to thrive, but you kind of just don't know how to? I know I feel that way a lot. And I wanted to talk about that today because this is the first video I'm doing after the 1 year anniversary of my near fatal medical emergency. And for me, I've had a fun realization, and it's that, I spent the past year surviving, and I had to. I mean, I nearly died. And I spent this past year focusing on how to rebuild my body, rebuild my mind, rebuild my life with this new reality. If you've watched that other video, you know it wasn't just the medical stuff I had to overcome, but because of my drinking, I was kind of in this little drunken state of mind for a long time during those COVID years. And so I had to get used to not only the physical stuff, but also being sober now and approaching life in a different way, not being able to rely on alcohol the way I had in the past. So during that time of trying to survive this new life, there was a lot of striving, and they're good striving, striving to be able to walk back into the forest, striving just to be able to walk across the room, to be honest. I was so sick, striving to be able to bathe myself. Like, I couldn't even stand up in the shower. I had to buy a medical chair to sit down in the shower. I mean, just all these things, like I talked about, not even being able to stand up on my own. And so I was constantly striving this past year. And when we're striving, we're kind of, there's a good lesson, when we're striving to be better, but you also kind of create a little bit of resistance. I'm trying to do more than I actually can. I'm forcing myself to do things that maybe I'm not able to. I have these limitations physically and mentally now because I'm having to rely on myself more instead of either other people's help or, like I mentioned in the past, the alcohol. So I'm creating this little bit of resistance because I'm striving so hard. And I realized that what I need to do is just kind of relax a little bit. And that's the key. I think about the forest here. Every year it goes through these phases. Right now it's fall, and the leaves have fallen. They're going to turn into nutrients for the forest. Then in the spring, the trees will come back, and I don't even know how. No one aerates the forest. I don't know how they get their nutrients, but just from the sun, and just it's just this replenishing. They're not worrying. They're just accepting what is. And I think I finally figured out when I was sort of meditating and thinking about, well, how do I move from surviving to thriving? Because I have this idea that I've got to do more, and thriving means I've got to make more money, and I've just got to work out more and all this sort of stuff. And what I'm doing really, though, is I'm building up resistance against reality. And when I'm building up that resistance against reality, I get exhausted. I get tired. It's hard constantly fighting reality. So then what is the answer? I thought, I love it because now that I'm in this new year, I'm realizing I don't have to fight those battles anymore. I don't have to struggle. I don't have to worry about what the doctors are going to say. I don't have to worry about the liver transplant. In fact, one of the things I'm most thankful for right now is the fact that I'm doing so well. Because a year ago, I assumed if I had lived a year, I would have had a liver transplant. I'd be on all these medicines. I'd be tired all the time. I would be weak. I'd be having to go to the doctors all the time for checkups. I'd be constantly worried about whether or not my body would reject this transplanted liver. Now, I'm healthy, I'm strong, I can go to the forest, I can do these fun videos. I have this new workout routine, I'm meal prepping better, I'm going to therapy, I'm meditating more, and like my life is just so much better. It's far better than I ever could have imagined a year ago. So I'm so thankful. So now in this new phase of life, I'm already kind of thriving. And so the lesson for me, at least, when I've been doing my meditations, is about this radical acceptance. When things come up that are bothering me and I'm having a hard time fighting, well, whatever it is, financial stuff, you know, interactions with relationships with like family and friends, with the holidays coming up in particular, I'm trying to strive to make things better, but sometimes I just can't. And because I can't just change that reality, I have to practice radical acceptance. That's what the thought that came to my mind, radical acceptance. When I was sick in the hospital, I talked about this in that last video about I had this idea of the roller coaster. And I mentioned how I'm already on the roller coaster. I can't get off. I had to radically accept what was happening to me physically and that I might die. I had to accept that reality, and I had to accept that my body might not heal. I'm so thankful it did. And that roller coaster, up and down, these worries, these tests, these plans for the liver, having the meld score stuff. If you don't know about that, they score your liver when you're in need of a transplant. That's kind of, when you're in that situation, I think you have to. Yeah, well, I won't even talk about the med score. Anyway, mine was bad. Of course, I nearly died. So that's why they bumped me on the liver transplant list so quickly. But it was radical acceptance that I'm on this roller coaster. I can't get off. I can't undo what I've done to myself. I take responsibility. I accept it. And I allow my body to heal. I use gratitude. I use meditation. I use my faith in God, and I accept this is where I am, and I need to just let the outcomes happen. And that's what radical acceptance is all about. So what I want to propose to you today is, in order to survive, go from surviving to thriving, practice radical acceptance. It's when we practice that radical acceptance that we let go of the outcomes and we just let life flow, just like the forest does. And when we let that happen and we accept reality and just what's going on, we start to see all these nice little positive things. Because then once we get rid of that resistance, I think that is when life gets better. Whether you call it law of attraction or you call it let go and let God, that's when we allow good things to come into our lives. And I think that you can start today. I think you can start thriving today. In fact, right now, in this very moment, while you're watching this, just take a deep breath. Think about something that you're struggling with, something that you're fighting against, that you're trying to fix and you haven't been able to. Think about that thing, and then let's take just a deep breath together and let it go. Radically accept that situation right now, this very moment. And just feel that resistance go away as you accept the situation. You allow God or the universe or just your own intuition and wisdom. Once you just let go and let that intuition, wisdom come to you, then you'll be able to take the appropriate actions. I think you'll get inspired on the steps that you need to take next. You can call it divine inspiration if you want to. I feel like when that happens to me, it's coming from another source. We get that inspiration. That way you can follow it. But that only happens when we clear our minds and we accept what is. So I hope that helps you today. I hope that you learn and start today to start thriving. I also wanted to mention something else to you all, just briefly. A little bit of real talk maybe. I've been doing this for a little bit, and if you've ever gone to a church, or I have some country buddies, so we go to things like rodeos and monster truck shows and things like that. And at these shows, or even at church, they're always saying things like, the more you interact, the better they perform. And I've been to churches. In fact, if you go to churches, you might have heard of Elevation Church here in Charlotte. I've gone there before, and I'm pretty sure I've heard the pastor there say something like, I'm preaching better than you're amening, And when it comes to YouTube, it's kind of like that a little bit. Here I am talking to the forest, I'm talking to the trees, hearing the birds. It's awesome, but I don't hear a whole lot from folks right now, and I'd like to. So if you've made it this far, I would love it, not only if you like and subscribe, But also leave me a comment. Let me know that you're here. Just like with those other performers or the pastors, you know, they say they need that interaction because it excites them, it helps them. And just think about not just me but other YouTube channels that you watch. When you leave a comment, it helps them know that you're engaged, and that helps motivate them to do more. Seriously, that does work. And even for me personally, now when I watch other people's videos, especially if it's a small channel like mine, I'm always careful to not just, because if you just watch it a little bit and then click off, the algorithm says, oh, well, that must not be a good video, and so it doesn't show it anymore. Now, if you're watching a big channel, that doesn't matter. And I'm just talking about for me personally. I feel like if I click on a video that's a small channel and I suddenly click off of it, it's like, you're walking through the door of a grocery store and someone's coming behind you and you don't hold the door open for them. It actually does hurt their analytics when you do that. And whether or not that matters to you, it matters to me because I don't want to be hurting anybody. So I kind of almost feel guilty when I do that. But the only reason I mention all of that to you all is it does help me. I've done about 90 videos so far. I've been doing this for about 5 months or so. And I appreciate everyone who has subscribed. And I just ask that you all maybe leave some comments so that I know you're here and that you're listening. And it helps me grow. I want this to be a community type thing. I don't want it all give the impression that I know it all, but I'm some sort of guru. I'm not. I'm just trying to make I love the Boba Fett quote in Star Wars. I'm just a simple man trying to make my way through the universe. No, it's Jango Fett, not Boba Fett. See, Star Wars person, I should know that, right? Jango Fett. I named a cat after Jango. Anyway, tangent, right? But I appreciate your all's being here. Please leave a comment, and it helps motivate me. And be cognizant when you're watching other people's videos. It helps them too. So I really appreciate that. I hope that you all are doing well. I'm glad to be back here in the forest. I've been away for just a little bit celebrating, but I'm glad to be back with you all. I hope that you all stay grateful. I hope that you stay kind. And as always, I'm grateful for each and every one of you, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day.